Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Barely Filtered. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Jillian Turecki, a certified relationship coach, teacher, writer, and host of the acclaimed podcast, Jillian on Love. With over 20 years of experience, Jillian has guided countless individuals towards healthier, more fulfilling relationships by emphasizing the importance of self-awareness and personal growth. Her debut book, It Begins With You, The 9 Hard Truths About Love That Will Change Your Life, offers profound insight into how our relationship with ourselves shapes our connection with others. Whether you're navigating heartbreak, seeking deeper intimacy, or striving to break free from old patterns, Jillian's wisdom is both grounding and transformative. I personally found her on Instagram because she talks about things that I talk about on this show, and she just seems to have insight so streamlined and in language that is easy for people to understand. So I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this, whether you're single in a relationship or just looking to feel a little bit more centered within yourself. She has so much great information. So let's welcome Jillian Turecki. Man, Jillian, first of all, tell me, how did you get to a place where now you are a relationship coach expert, and even for Bumble, which is one of the biggest, obvious, dating apps in the world?
Well, it all started 25 years ago when I discovered yoga. I knew that this was something that I wanted to teach. I felt it in my bones. And after about 3 years of practicing it every day, and then I became a yoga teacher. The way that I like to describe it is I teach people how to heal their relationship with themselves through this practice of yoga. And I worked with a lot of people individually on their physical pain, which I learned was very closely linked to their emotional pain. And I also learned that when I worked with couples, that their relationship improved the more they actually engaged in this practice of yoga, especially when they did it together.
Oh.
Yeah. Together with me privately, not necessarily going to classes together, but for some people for sure. And I also noticed it in people who were parents and husbands and wives that when they were practicing yoga, they would give me the feedback that all their relationships improved. As a yoga teacher, I was very skilled at recognizing patterns. I could look at a person and tell by the way that they're holding their body and their spine what is ailing them emotionally. And so that was sort of my genius zone with teaching yoga. But then, I would say how many years into teaching it, 8 years into teaching it or so, I felt like I wanted something more. But at the same time, I also got married to the man who had become my husband and then my ex-husband. My life was all about focusing on him and obsessing about the relationship. And then also at the same time, everything was sort of status quo with teaching yoga, but also stagnant. The status quo is kind of stagnant. And I knew that I wanted more, but I didn't know what that was. And I was never taught. I always beat to my own drum and I always did what I wanted to do, but I was never taught how important it is to really focus on your life and to find purpose and meaning. And our relationship was very difficult. I always say that our relationship prior to getting married was about 90% great and 10% horrible. And you might think, well, that's pretty good. But the 10%, like I said, was not problematic. It was horrible.
Oh, okay.
And it was that 10% was very profound. And that 10% is the reason why I should never have married him.
Right.
And so, but then when we got married, the 90% became the 10% and the 10% became the 90%. So everything just expanded. And it was a very, very painful, difficult marriage. And we had no idea what the hell we were doing. And the way that it ended was horrible. He did it over a text on the morning that I was having a miscarriage and my mom was dying. And, he knew all of this. And so I was abandoned. And I always say that that's the day that I died and a new life emerged. And I became obsessed with two things. One, how am I going to get myself out of this hole that I'm in emotionally and also in every way? And then the second was, what does it take to make a relationship work? Because I was absolutely devastated by the fact that I was in this position, that I was left, that I was going to be divorced, that I was the age that I was at the time, and that I was going to be entering the world single. Absolutely devastated. And I could not believe it was happening to me. Like I couldn't believe that my life conditions were what they were. It was shocking to me. And so I went on a complete journey on trying to figure it out, and hired coaches, and I had mentors, and I figured out things that I never thought I could figure out. And the teacher inside of me was just like, you have to teach this. This is your new path. And so here I am.
Wow.
It's 11 years later.
How crazy. We have a lot of parallels. So I used to teach yoga as well. I also married the wrong person and got divorced, and couldn't believe that I was then entering the world as, I also have 2 kids. So a single mom of 2 kids, divorced, in my now I'm going to be 36 soon, but, it's just, I could have never imagined it for myself in a million years, but also I feel like it's such a gift because I have had to do so much inner work and figuring out why, how do you make a relationship work? But I guess my question for you is were you asking yourself, how do I make a relationship work, or how do I choose a better partner?
No, initially I was asking, what makes a relationship work?
Why did this fall apart?
Well, in the beginning, it's confusing. You think it's them. You also think it's you, and you're ping-ponging back and forth between blaming them and blaming yourself, blaming God or blaming the universe. It's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of shame and a lot of you're not thinking clearly. So initially, it was just like, what does it take? What does it have to take? What's going on? What's the problem? Why did this happen?
Right. And during that time when you were seeking professional help and coaching, what do you think was your biggest takeaway? Is there one thing that was kind of like something that never occurred to you before?
Yeah, the title of my book, It Begins With You. Like if we want you have to start looking within. The common denominator in all your relationships is you. Now, that does not mean that you are the quote unquote problem, but we are part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, it's not like something's wrong with you, you are problematic. It's what are your habits, beliefs, and conditioning that are leading you in this direction? And how can you create change in your life?
Okay. And it starts with you, and it starts with I heard you say before that your relationship is just kind of a reflection of how happy you already are in your life. Is that accurate?
I don't believe a reflection of how happy you are. I don't remember
how content. I think you said something along the lines of, if you're content in your life and you have enough things that are making you feel like fulfilled, then you won't be looking for it in your relationship. Or correct me if I'm wrong.
You are going to be looking for that somewhat in your relationship, but there's no relationship is going to save you from yourself.
Right.
So it's very important. It's an ongoing, it's not like, oh, I'm fulfilled, now I can get into a relationship. It's an ongoing process of tending to our relationship with ourselves. And we have to have meaning in life that's separate from the relationship. And when we're in the relationship and we lose ourselves a little bit and we stop taking care of ourselves and filling our cup, it is an ongoing process of filling ourselves up.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Because I do think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I can't date yet because I am 10 pounds overweight, or I don't have the right job yet, or I'm not ready yet.
Yeah. Well, that's a nuanced thing. It's a nuanced thing. For men, if they don't have a job, let's say if they're jobless and after a certain age, they're not going to feel good about themselves at all. And therefore, they're not going to make a good partner. And so I understand that. And also, there's not a lot of people who want to date someone without a job. Right. So there is some truth to that. But what is false is I have to be totally healed. There's no such thing as totally healed. And also healed from what?
Yeah, I know.
Healed from what? Like, what does that even mean? But we are never fully cooked. It's an ongoing process, and you're going to be confronted with lots of different things in the relationship. So it's like, again, it's a practice.
Interesting. I have a question that might be a little bit of a me thing, but I know that I'm not unique in this. So I went through a divorce, and of course it was painful, and there were sleepless nights, and just also the logistics of it and having two kids. But I feel like I have been more traumatized and hurt and rejected by people that I've gone on a few dates with who didn't want to be with me, maybe, than somebody who I was in a relationship with for years. Do you find that to be a common phenomenon?
I would ask the person to really ask, is it traumatizing, or are you using that word flippantly?
Okay.
I think because when we use words to describe something, it has a biochemical effect on our body. And so I would find it very disturbing if someone were traumatized by going on a date with someone twice, unless there was any sort of violence or abuse of any sort. So what do you mean?
Okay,
when
so
you
not
say, yeah.
So traumatizing, I guess maybe is an exaggeration, but cause a lot more ruminating thoughts, a lot of it takes up a lot more time in your brain,
And energy. Yeah.
and a lot more energy. You feel more hurt. It takes longer to recover.
Yeah. From someone that you've been on a few dates with, or like a few weeks, like
Maybe somebody you've known for a few months.
Oh, yeah, a few months. Okay. So that's very different than 2 dates for sure. And this has been since your divorce?
No, not. Well, yeah, I guess one of them was after my divorce. A guy who I had been on, I don't know, maybe 5 dates with over 2 months. I felt more hurt by that relationship, quote unquote, coming to an end than my entire relationship with my ex-husband.
Yeah. So part of that is what's your level, like how vulnerable did you feel starting that relationship?
Mm-hmm.
How much lust was there? How attracted were you to that person? How much did you get carried away by the dream of what it could have been?
Mm-hmm.
What else is going on in your life when you met this person? Do you have a lot of pressure that you put on yourself to meet someone because you were divorced?
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually really important. I'm so glad you asked that question, because what people really need to understand is how much context and nuance needs to be explored when we are experiencing something like what you're saying.
Right. Because it could be so many other things going on. And I'm thinking it's just this guy,
Yes.
but maybe it has littler to do with him than I'm realizing.
Correct.
Okay. I hear you talk about immature love versus mature love.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And it took me a long time to understand what it means to really love and to be loved. So immature love is all about, what can you give me? What can I get from you? Meet my needs, be perfect, be exactly how I have projected you to be. And if you're not, then you're going to fall off the pedestal. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to punish you. That's immature love. Mature love is about giving. It's about, your needs are as important to me as my own. Not more, not less. Mature love is collaboration, communication. It's accepting each other's nuances and limitations. It's patience. Love is a skill. Immature love is what, unfortunately, so many of us are doing in adulthood. But it's like baby love, which is, feed me, burp me, love me, and I'm not really going to give you much in return.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I can only talk about my own experience with, but with my ex-husband, we actually didn't have one argument, one disagreement, one fight for the first 2 years of being together. And I remember thinking wow, we're such like an elite couple. What do people even have to fight about? This is, we must be so in love and so evolved. But when I look back now, I'm like, actually, that was not very healthy. That obviously there were things that I just didn't bring up because I was trying to avoid conflict, and maybe him too.
Probably, yeah.
There wasn't communication. And that's why we never had a disagreement, because we were kind of walking on eggshells to be whoever the other person needed us to be. Which I just think is so interesting, because now that I'm in the dating world, it's hard to balance that? Like, you don't want to create conflict, but you also want to communicate your needs.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are in that situation, especially with someone that they're just still getting to know? How do we avoid making unnecessary conflict, but still trying to be communicative?
So the unnecessary conflict happens because we're all afraid that we're not enough in some way. And the unnecessary conflict comes from withholding love, with punishing, testing the other person's a lot. That's what women do a lot. Let me see if how much I can push this person's buttons to make sure that they're not going anywhere. Because women are always looking for safety. So we are testing the waters constantly to make sure that you're going to be strong enough and safe enough for us. But the communication part is really about sharing what it is that you need to be loved. What it is that actually, like, you're giving someone some guidance on how to love you. It's not this detailed, like, the worst thing that you can do is get into a relationship and be like, here's the manual on me. Here's the manual on how you can please me. It's more of a conversation about what works. How, like, what do you need to feel loved and to feel important? What's your communication style? This is my communication style. And then you have to figure out, like, what's really important to you, like what you're willing to budge on, and the things that you're like, okay, I'm going to have some flexibility. But the magic is just in being totally honest about it. And if it's really early dating, you have to be completely upfront about what kind of relationship you want, and be willing to walk away from anyone who's like, nah, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's so hard to do, because I find that a lot of times we just kind of want to give them more chances, see if maybe we can change their mind.
Yes. Yes.
Something
Women love to do that.
Yeah, I have definitely. I hope that I've learned my lesson now after, like, I don't know, the 10th go around with that one. But one thing that I saw on a video, I forget his name, but some guy was like, a lot of, like, most people can handle their partner's big emotions, but what ends relationship is their partner's weapons. And I kind of had to sit with that for a minute, because it sounds like it's kind of what you're saying, with, like, our weapons are the manipulations that we don't even know we're doing sometimes. Yes. And I guess for me, how do you avoid testing somebody in the beginning of a relationship? That would be hard for me to avoid. But when I think about it, maybe it really is manipulation, because you want to, like, what is the beginning of dating if not testing each other out, right?
You're testing each other out, but you're not intentionally trying to trigger someone to see what their reaction is going to be.
Because people can feel that.
And the problem is that we're doing it unconsciously. So we have to be conscious of that and not do it.
Right. So you have to be aware.
And just be like, oh, I'm wanting to do that because maybe I'm feeling uncertain and I want to feel more certain. Maybe it's different for everyone, but maybe it's having a conversation about what you need to feel more certain in the relationship. Okay. It's also about appreciating what the person is bringing as well. Like, sometimes it's uncertainty. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know. Like, can I boss you around? Because if I can boss you around, that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to try. This is not everyone, but there are some people who do this. I'm going to try bossing you around and see if I get away with it. That's the manipulation.
Right.
Because maybe, and this happens a lot with women and men, maybe she detects something in him that's a little bit weak. So, like, maybe she feels like he's giving to her not from a place of generosity, but from a place of insecurity and pleasing. So then she might then push to see, like, is he going to tolerate my BS? This is a very common thing that happens, by the way. Is he going to tolerate my BS? Is he a pleaser? Like, how far can I take this? It happens a lot.
Yeah, well, it happens with kids too. That's what I'm thinking. That they test their limits, because how else do they know their boundaries?
Right.
Interesting. How do we know? How do we know if what we are in is a genuine, unique, authentic connection, or just a projection of what we want it to be?
Difficult conversations, real conversations. how, you said the first 2 years of your marriage, you didn't have any arguments, but a big part of it is like, how do you handle an argument? How do you handle a disagreement? Because we test the relationship and our own level of commitment when there's an argument, and it's so like, how in it are we to really problem solve and figure it out and make sure that we get to the other side of it so that we restore harmony again? I think that's a really, really strong measure of whether or not whether this is a true connection that's building into a real relationship versus, something immature.
What would you say if in a relationship, every time there's an argument or a disagreement, one person brings up, okay, well, do you think maybe we should go on a break or should we slow things down? I've seen that in dating a little bit. And for me, it's felt like manipulation. Is it?
Well, I guess it depends who's saying it. I think sometimes, the manipulation might be, I actually don't want to be with you, but I don't know how, I don't have the courage to actually break up with you. So I'll say, let's go on a break.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. The way I felt it, I think, is more like, if you're going to disagree with me, then I know how much it means to you for us to be together. So I'm going to dangle this as like collateral to you not agreeing with everything that I want.
That would be a highly manipulative person for sure.
TBD.
TBD.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about love bombing, because I feel like that comes up a lot and I think the word is probably overused. How do we know if this is a genuine display of affection or if we're being love bombed?
So there's the love bombing that comes from someone who's incredibly immature, doesn't understand love, is trying to impress you. And then once they get you, they're kind of not going to be that interested. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're plotting this against you like some psychopathic person, right? But either way, it's we don't want it. But some signs of it are just, oh my God, you're so amazing. You're the most amazing person I've ever met. And you've known each other like a week, if that, maybe even a night. I could see ourselves being together. Oh my God, you're so incredible. I've never met anyone like you. Let's go away. I want to take you on vacation. Like, oh my God. Where you get this feeling inside of you where you're like, how could you feel so strongly about me when you don't know me? Or you feel this sense of, wow, I have a feeling I'm not the first girl he's said this to, that this is something he's done before. And I say he because most of the time it's a him who's love bombing, but it's not always. But yeah, so I think those are the signs. Sometimes it's just people who are very enthusiastic and not really processing their enthusiasm. And you can say, hey, I really like you. It's feeling a lot very fast. I do like you and I'm attracted to you, because you have to add that reassurance, because otherwise one could interpret it as they're just not into me. You could say, I'm totally into you, but this feels like a lot. And with my experience, with my past, I just want to go a little bit slower. That person who's not actually love bombing will be like, okay, they'll take the feedback and they'll put in an effort to kind of communicate with you about the pace and making it different.
Speaking of pace, I've had a lot of dating coach and love experts on here, and everybody seems to have something different to say about when is an appropriate time to have sex. Do you feel there's a certain time that's better than another when dating to have sex?
I believe that it's nuanced and it depends on the people. I think that if you're someone, and a lot of women have this, who you bond. So women bond after a sexual experience with someone with whom they feel connected. And that is and that is the role of estrogen. And it actually happens to postmenopausal women, but not as much, but it does happen, because even in postmenopause, your adrenal glands are still producing estrogen. You're still a woman, right? So, but when you've got a lot of estrogen in your body, when you have that kind of emotional connection, what we produce is something called oxytocin, and men produce it in a much smaller level. And when they do produce it, it's really not from sex unless they are they're in love with the person who they're having sex with. So it's biological. We bond and then we want to be chosen, and we want more of that connection with this person. And so the conundrum that creates for the person who experiences that is that they're having sex with someone, not communicating, and then they have no idea what sex means to the other person. And then they end up getting hurt because they never maybe get called again, or they think that, their relationship's being taken to the next level, or they're craving. It's like, then when they're not with that person, because it's not a relationship yet, or maybe ever, when they felt so filled up by that connection that when they're not having it, then what happens to that woman is that then she goes into feeling empty. And then she feels empty and thinks that the only way that her cup will be restored and filled up is through more of this person. When really it's not about them, but it's more about what's happening biologically in that moment. And then if you throw into the mix someone who has low self-esteem, who's desperate for love, who doesn't feel like basically low self-esteem, like I said, then you get a real storm of emotional turmoil and chaos for that person. In which case, that is the person who should wait until there's a commitment, wait until you're on the same page. And let me tell you something, that is a turn on for most people. Because it's also saying, I value myself. Now, there's no judgment in a woman having casual sex or a man having casual sex, but there is something to be said about saying, you know what? I've done that. It burned me in the past. I'm not doing that anymore. That sends the message of self-worth.
Okay. Makes sense. So it sounds like you're taking a risk if you're a woman who is expecting a certain behavior from the man.
This doesn't even have to be gendered. It's just a lot of women experience that more so because of the biology. But just if you are someone who assigned, it's the meaning that you give sex. And you have to be honest with yourself, because a lot of people will say, a lot of women will tell themselves, oh yeah, I can do casual sex because I'm cool. No, you have to be stop lying to yourself, be very honest with yourself about what this experience means and what it has done to you in the past. And just remember that you could potentially be ghosted. You could potentially you could have an amazing experience and never see that person again. And all I'm saying is protect your heart.
That makes complete sense. And it sounds like if you're expecting a relationship out of it, you might find yourself in trouble.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about rejection, because I love how you share, especially on your Instagram and on your podcast too, just things that I think innately we all should know, but that we forget. And so if somebody is in a relationship, maybe a short relationship, a long relationship, and their partner comes to them and says, I don't choose you, I don't love you, I don't want to be with you. How does somebody move on from that and avoid the devastation as much as possible?
Well, the devastation, depends who's saying that to you. Is it your spouse, or is it someone that you've known a week? But either way, so if it's someone you've known a week, it's more your ego than anything else. Look, it's one of the sad things that's built into the fabric of life, that sometimes people want to leave. Sometimes the person who wants to leave, you're much better off without them. Sometimes you've wanted to leave, but you just never had the courage to. That was my scenario with my ex-husband. It's part of life. I would never date anyone. I would never trust anyone over a certain age who'd never been heartbroken. Personally, it builds character. It builds strength. We have to be able to connect to that feeling of loss in our life and what that means. what's important is that you don't then give it a meaning that you're not good enough. Everyone always leaves you. It's that which turns into learned helplessness, which makes us into a victim that then perpetuates the story that we run into a lot of trouble.
Right. Probably makes us not that attractive to a potential new partner either.
It doesn't, but more importantly, it keeps us stuck in suffering.
Mm-hmm. So in order to not be a victim,
Yeah.
what are some things people can do?
Well, you can feel a little bit like a victim in the beginning if someone's hurt you, of course. That's okay. Like you have to really acknowledge when someone has really hurt you or acknowledge how sad and unfair it feels to be rejected. But then when you're moving out of that initial stage, it's really about examining the story. Like with my ex-husband, I was in sheer devastation. But what helped me heal was recognizing like, oh, I wasn't happy either.
Mm.
He did what he could do with his emotional tools. This is actually not really even about me. I was not, had he never left, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Sometimes it's about playing back the documentary of your relationship and not the fantasy of it, not the Disney Channel part of it. And that's how you start to slowly emancipate yourself from that story and that pain.
Yeah. It's so hard to play back something that you were a part of and not continue to see the same things over and over again.
Yes.
And it's hard to see things in a different light. And sometimes I know I've struggled with like, who can I come to with this? Who's going to be objective? And usually it's not somebody in my family. It's usually a coach or a therapist or something that has helped me see the situation in a different light.
Yeah.
But it even takes time.
Yes, it does. It does take time, but it's always that's the role of someone who's helping you, is to help you see it from a different perspective.
Right. And to see our role in it too. Because I guess sometimes it's, that's I think that's one of the hardest parts, is to look back and be like, damn, maybe it wasn't all him. Maybe I could have done something better.
Yeah, I know. It's very humbling.
Yeah. To the person who feels that they're just kind of manifesting the same relationship over and over again with a different person, what would you say to them?
Well, first, acknowledge that that's what's happening. And then we have to look into why we keep choosing this same person, and what is it about this person that you keep choosing. And that might open a door into childhood. That will open a door into childhood for sure. But it also will open a door into just conditioning in general. It's also going to give you insight into the dynamics that you keep kind of getting yourself into. It might also mean that you have to change. It will mean that you have a certain type, and you have to understand what is it about that type. And then you have to recondition yourself towards a different type. You have to go for a different kind of person. And there's so much, and it's not just one thing. And it depends on the person that's going to be open up from that. It could be someone's relationship with their father or their mother. And then related to that, it could be self-esteem. It could be, you never were modeled healthy relationships. It could be that you're stuck on a certain type, like they have to be a certain way, because I don't know, you're stubborn about that. Like you're really stuck on that. And there's a lot of surrender that has to happen, and letting go of that to kind of expand your mind to be with a different kind of person. But it depends, what the similarity is. Is the similarity that you're with someone who manipulates you and abuses you? Is the similarity that the person is just like not that engaged in the relationship, and so you overfunction? So you have to understand what is continuously to date the same person but in a different body. What needs is it meeting in you? Like what needs is it actually fulfilling in you? Because there's a method to all of our madness. It's like the person who finds themselves in relationships with people who are really messed up in some way, and they have to fix them or heal them or reform them. It's like, okay, well, somewhere along the way you learned, or you or you developed a muscle, an emotional muscle, a thing inside of you, an identity muscle that's like you're a healer, you're a fixer, you're a problem solver. And that might work in many areas of your life. But you've also believed that if you're not doing that, you have no value. So maybe you get yourself into relationships with people who are, sort of like not on your level, because then they'll need you, right? So you always have to, there's a lot to uncover.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to uncover. It's very fascinating.
It is fascinating. I think that last example, I think you kind of named me a little bit. I think there's a lot of, especially like oldest girls in families or a girl in a family who has been given a lot of responsibility from a young age and kind of finds her worth in what she can give and do and to help. I think that can make for kind of a tough dynamic in relationships sometimes, because you are seeking like validation in your value from what you're doing and giving.
Right. Versus just who you are. And the kind of friend that you are. And the kind of partner that you are. And just for being you.
Yeah. I have a question for you about women who are like 38 and older, who are finding themselves single and still wanting to have kids. I've heard that the dating apps kind of bury them in the algorithm, because men who also want to have kids generally don't want somebody who might have a hard time having kids, aka somebody who is a geriatric pregnancy, which happens to be if you're over 34, which is just ridiculous.
I know. Wild, right?
Would you recommend women lying about their age on their dating profile and then coming clean once they match with somebody?
No. Yeah, you can't lie. You can't lie. That's terrible. You have to be totally honest. You have to, if you can, freeze your eggs. And then don't just rely on the apps to meet people. You have to have, it's like you never just want one source of income. You want, like, if you really want to tap into your wealth, you need to have multiple sources of income. You can't just have one source of love. You need different sources of love. You can't just have one thing that fulfills you. You need a few things that you can find some joy in. So it's the same thing with dating. You have to be resourceful and you have to be honest. And yes, that may be a problem, but just you have to rely on other things as well. But don't lie. Don't lie.
Don't lie on your dating profile. Okay, because that's the advice that's out there, because evidently, and a lot of people do it, they lie only to be discoverable. Yeah. But then when they match, they're like, just so you know, I'm actually 40.
So they're trying to hack the system.
Yes, they're not trying to lie to a potential partner. They're trying to hack the algorithm.
Yeah, but I don't know. I would be really annoyed if someone was lying about that and then I found out. Like if someone doesn't want to be with a 40-year-old woman, it's going to make no difference if he finds out first or if he finds out like a week later. He's just not going to want that.
I agree. I don't know. Yeah. Evidently, if you're really hot, it doesn't matter. That's what my friend has told me. I have two friends who are
like when you meet, it's like you see how hot. No, because you can see in the photos. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Although I will say I did set this I'm just going to admit this. It was a shallow bar where I said, I don't want anybody under like 5'10" or something. And then, and I actually ended up now dating somebody who's like 5'8", and I think that he's so sexy. So it's like, I think sometimes we limit.
So the lesson in that is don't do that.
Yeah.
You have to be way more open-minded. You are not, here's a newsflash. You are not going to get the perfect looking man in the perfect height with the perfect bank account who treats you like a princess. It's not going to happen. He does not exist.
How dare you?
No, but what you could find, if you open your mind, you can meet the 5'8" person who turns you on like crazy. And you never thought that you could be turned on, but you find him so sexy because he's got strong character, he's got sweat, whatever it is, he's got something about him. And he loves you and he treats you well.
Yeah. It's nice to be surprised too. I will say it's nice to realize. It's nice to
I love short guys.
You do. I like
do.
bald guys usually.
I like short guys. I mean, you can't be shorter than me, but I'm pretty tiny. But yeah, I like short guys. As long as you're bigger than me and stronger than me, you can be totally short. I don't care. I think it's hot. Yeah.
It's interesting. Like, I like to be reminded that I don't know everything about what I like. You know, I think we know everything about what we want and what we like and what would make us happy, but
absolutely. You don't. And typically I'm using this almost metaphorically, when we pray for something to come to us, we have to be very, very smart and with eyes wide open, because it might come to us wrapped in a different bow. And if we're so fixated on having to be an exact way, well, then we miss out on our lives.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. Wow. It reminds me of this. There's a lot of little parables about that. But yes, if you're praying for something, you got to keep your eyes open, because there's so many ways that it can come in, and it can look like a breakup, and it could be painful, and it can not feel good right away. But
totally,
on the other side, we never know. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm getting a flag from my producers over here, but I just want to leave my listeners with something positive. Let's talk just for a second about, how do you know when you found true love?
You know, people think it's about the other person. It's about you too. Is this someone who you want to build with? Is this someone who you want to do life with? Is this someone who you would rather, do you want to walk the path with this person? Do you choose them, and do they choose you? And it's not just about fear or convenience. That's how I think you find it.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
I love that.
And we have to move away from the romanticization of it all. Yeah.
I know. It's hard because it's so ingrained in us, but it is choosing somebody is work. Like, you're choosing them every day, even on bad days.
Yes.
Choosing them when you don't really like how they're acting maybe in that moment, but still choosing them.
Yes.
I love that. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all your wisdom. And I just love everything that you share on your Instagram and on your podcast. And I know that you recently wrote a new book. So can you just tell us where we can find that?
It's called It Begins With You, the 9 Hard Truths About Love That Will Change Your Life. And you can find it literally anywhere. It's wherever books are sold.
Do you have an audio version of that?
I do. So it's on Audible for sure.
Amazing.
And I narrated it. I narrated it myself.
Oh my God, amazing. There's nothing worse than when it's a robot.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. So it's like, you can get the Audible, you can get Kindle, hardcover, wherever books are sold.
Amazing. Well, I definitely will be getting that on Audible. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Barely Filtered. And I hope you have a great day over there in sunny Miami. I'll be there tomorrow. So
yay!
Maybe I'll bump into you.